A very good evening. I'm Peter Mitchell and this is a special 7 News production. Vote 2022, Victoria decides. In the coming hours, we'll learn whether Daniel Andrews wins a historic third term as Victorian Premier or whether Matthew Guy and the Coalition can pull off an election miracle. Our expert panel is here to talk you all the way through it. Former Labor Premier Steve Bracks joins us, former Liberal Premier Jeff Kennett, of course, and our state political editor, Chanel Vella. Jeff, we're going to start with you. What are your sources telling you about what's about to unfold this evening?
I've spoken to a lot of people. I have decided, Peter, that until we start seeing the votes coming up, there's no point speculating.
Anything could happen.
Anything could happen, and having said that, I am looking forward to the end of this campaign and getting back to life. All right? And I think the majority
very restrained
of the
by you.
I think most of the public are too.
And I think many of the viewers have already determined you're wearing a red tie.
Well, I was going to wear a red shirt because I thought it would have been appropriate. But, I mean, when you think that almost 50% of the electorate has already voted, that's a huge number.
That's extraordinary.
And it's covered a period of time where the mood changed in that period of time. So, quite obviously, I think earlier on it would have favoured the government. Later on, it probably favoured the coalition. Who knows? Who knows? Time will tell.
Steve, your view, what are your sources telling you?
Well, much the same as the polls are saying, to tell the truth. That is that Labor will lose some seats to the Liberals, will lose some maybe to an independent, a couple of the Greens, but in the end probably be able to form a majority government. It'll be a reduced majority, but a majority. The second most likely outcome, of course, is a hung parliament, and they're probably the only two outcomes that could happen. It looks like it's very hard for the Liberals to win. They'd have to win.
You won a few years
I did.
ago. No one expected
you want to bring that one up already?
Are we already talking about that?
And you lost? No one expected you to lose.
Well, I just thought you did the job for a while.
But the provincial seats seem to be holding.
Yes.
The southeast, the Sandbelt, probably holding, and so it comes down to the outer east and some of the outer southeast. They're going to be the key, I think.
Now, Chanel, you've covered the whole campaign. It's been a long campaign, a tiring campaign for everybody concerned.
It has.
What are your views on what might happen?
Well, we've seen integrity issues play out for both leaders, and that's obviously going to feed into the vote. We've seen healthcare front and centre, COVID lingering in the background, neither leader really wanting to touch on it. And then, of course, there is the Daniel Andrews impact that we can't measure on the polls. We'll have to see if people vote because they don't like him or if they think that he's the one that can get him through the next 4 years. Don't say anything.
It promises to be a fascinating evening indeed. Our political editor, Mark Riley, has brought his screen of dreams to Melbourne. And Mark, you're starting with a blank page tonight.
With a blank page, Peter. Tonight, this screen will be populated with dreams made and dreams broken and just a few nightmares, I imagine, on that. And I'm impressed that it's only taken a few minutes for the Bracks Kennett show to start. I thought that would happen a little bit later. But tonight, it's all about the numbers. 45 to win. The government starts the night on 55 and the coalition on about 27. There'll be a vote in the middle there, a third way, no doubt. The Greens might pick up a couple, maybe three on a good night, and independents, Teals, and those others who call themselves independent, real independent, but not Teal, may get themselves a couple of seats as well. But this is where the narrative of the night will emerge in those colours. We'll walk you through it. The numbers coming from the Electoral Commission, going through our algorithms, making all the predictions first, fast and accurate, Pete.
Good on you, Mark, and we'll be back to you shortly. Our team is monitoring both the major party headquarters, of course. Let's begin with Mike Amor at Labor headquarters in Mulgrave this evening. Mike, good evening to you.
Good evening, Mitch. We're in the Premier's seat of Mulgrave and this is where history will be made tonight, one way or the other. There's really three options for Daniel Andrews when he enters this room in the coming hours. He could be making a third victory speech, stamping his authority as one of the state's most successful ever premiers. He could be making a concession speech, or he could be giving a holding speech if the result is too close to call. We know Daniel Andrews voted early. Today he did just one photo opportunity, and that was at one of his signature level crossing projects in Glen Huntly. It was a tightly guarded, heavily controlled event. He was there for less than 10 minutes speaking with workers, and in the minutes after polls opened this morning, he spoke to Sunrise, where he was asked about why he's become such a divisive figure in the wake of the pandemic.
Well, we had lockdowns because we didn't have a vaccine. And those lockdowns and the amazing efforts that Victorians went to, that sense of unity right across our state, acts of kindness and compassion, the absolute connection between Victorians right across our state saved tens of thousands of lives.
Daniel Andrews holds the seat of Mulgrave by a healthy margin, almost 16 points, but he is being challenged here significantly. Independent Ian Cook, who was at the centre of the I Cook Food Sluggate saga, and also, believe it or not, a Kim Jong-un impersonated Howard Lee are among those challenging him. It really would be quite unprecedented if Mr Andrews loses his seat but Labor still wins government. It's something we'll be watching closely throughout the count. Further north from here, 7 News senior reporter Nick McCallum is at Liberal headquarters in Doncaster. Nick, Matthew Guy needs a Scott Morrison-style election miracle tonight.
Yes, he does, Mike. We're at the Doncaster Bowling Club. After polls close at 6 o'clock, they're expecting about 100 people here. Now, I've just got a message from a Liberal Party insider who says, having toured the booths today and over the past couple of weeks, the pre-polling, they're all now very confident they will hold the seats that they currently hold, including those under siege by the Teals, particularly Kew and Mornington. He also says to look out for Ashwood, Box Hill, Ringwood, Yan Yean and Melton. They believe they are now all in play, and Melton's interesting because if the Liberals pick up Melton, it'll be the first seat they'll get in western suburbs of Melbourne since 1999. Matthew Guy, when he went out voting this morning, made it very clear he's been out in amongst the people. He's been having beers with the people, and of course that's a marked contrast with Daniel Andrews, who's had very controlled events. Mr Guy is always optimistic. Let's listen to what he said this morning.
Mark McGowan won facing the biggest margin ever against an opposition in WA history. Steve Bracks came back from a margin that was greater. Ted Baillieu came back from a margin that was greater. So, look, these things have been done before in recent times, and I'm confident we can do that tonight.
A huge 2.2 million people pre-polled. They voted before today, and the Liberals are interpreting that as people being keen for change. But, of course, they would say that, wouldn't they, Mike?
Thanks, Nick. We'll be back to you throughout the night. And we have cameras, of course, in position in all the key seats right across the state tonight, and whenever they appear, you'll hear from Daniel Andrews and Matthew Guy addressing their party faithful live right here on 7 News. For now, it's back to you, Mitch.
Good on you, Mike. Thanks very much indeed. And depending which polls you read or experts you listen to, there is the prospect of a hung parliament tonight and therefore a minority government. We'll discuss that next. You're watching 7's special coverage as Victoria decides.
What was your seat?
Welcome back. The Greens won 3 lower house seats in 2018 and they'll be looking to build on that tonight and potentially hold the balance of power in the new look parliament. 7 News reporter Jodie Lee is at Greens headquarters in Collingwood this evening. Jodie, the Greens are hoping for their best ever result in Victoria.
Mitch, the Greens come into tonight's election incredibly confident, particularly in key inner Melbourne seats. Now, they already hold Melbourne, Brunswick and Prahran. They're likely to retain those seats tonight, but they also have their sights firmly set on 3 more, being Albert Park, Northcote and Richmond. It is likely that they could snatch all 3. Tonight, they will be relying on the retirement of 2 senior Labor members, on the general gentrification of inner Melbourne and those electorates themselves, and of course, that swing we've seen away from the 2 major parties. That was certainly a key feature of the federal election in May. The Greens are hoping we will see the same tonight.
Today could be a turning point in Victorian state politics. We've been talking to thousands of voters over this campaign who want politics done differently, who are sick and tired of the major parties taking them for granted and want more Greens elected to make this happen.
If they do double their seats in the lower house and go from 3 to 6, they'll hold the balance of power, and they will be calling Labor to the party on a number of key issues, among them gas exploration, rising rental yields and deforestation. So, Mitch, the Greens are certainly a party to watch tonight.
Jodie Lee in Collingwood, thank you very much. And Chanel Vella, we're certainly going to see a bigger crossbench, aren't we, in the new parliament?
I think so. I think it could be a little bit more diverse than what we've seen. You don't agree, Jeff?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I mean, I understand Richmond might easily fall. Richmond as a community is changing very much. There's a lower socio-economic area, but there's a very wealthy part of that seat as well. So I would prefer not to see a minority government having to work with the Greens.
We are speculating with the booths still open, of course, but Steve, you've worked with a hung parliament before, you know that very well.
And it was a great pleasure after 3 years to get a majority.
You don't want to bring up the war.
Yes, I did work with a hung parliament, and it is hard work. It's very hard work, and I don't think anyone would wish that. I think it's better for Victoria to have a majority government. But just on the Greens, though, the only reason the Greens will probably win Richmond and might win Northcote is because they're getting preferences from the Liberal Party. Now, in the last campaign, in 2018, quite rightly, Ted Baillieu said, no, that is not part of Liberal values. We will not preference the Greens over Labor. So effectively, I think the Liberals are pitching for a hung parliament. By preferencing the Greens first, that's what they're hoping for in a two-election strategy. That is to get a hung parliament now, make it difficult for Labor in a hung parliament, and then to go next time. That's what they're trying to do.
What about the Teals getting more seats on the crossbench too?
I think the Teals will get more seats than the Greens. That's my guess. If you look at the Teals plus the Voices candidate, I'm tipping Benambra with the Voices candidate, a woman standing there who works for Helen Haynes. I think that one will be a change. I think the independents will hold with Voices candidate Shepparton. I think Q is a Monty for the Teals as well. There's three, and
Mornington's a possibility.
And I know the Liberals are worried about Mornington as well. So you know, they've probably got as many as the Greens.
But what about Caulfield though? Don't the Liberals have to worry about Caulfield? I think they do.
Well, Caulfield's an unusual one because I think it's evenly split between Liberal, Labor, and the Teal. So look, I can't pick Caulfield. It's just going to be. You're going to have to wait on Caulfield. It's going to be difficult.
It's a fascinating discussion before the polls close. So stay with us, please. We're back with more in just a few minutes. The first results are not all that far away, with the polling booths set to close at 6 p.m. as Victoria decides. Mark Riley, is Daniel Andrews' own seat of Mulgrave really in jeopardy?
Well, every seat's up for play. There are 88 seats tonight, 88 by-elections. In the seat of Mulgrave, the Premier seat, there's a very interesting contest. Why? Because an independent, Ian Cook, has had a pretty crook time over in this seat. If you think about the iCook scandal, Sluggate it's been called by some, he's running. This is the result from 2018. We don't have any numbers for today. The Premier's margin is about 15.8%. He profited from a fairly strong swing at the last election. But this one's a little bit different because of Ian Cook, a very high-profile independent there, who's done his own polling, although just between you and me, sounds like a bit of, say, slippery poll, an exit poll, where he's very confident now of winning that seat. But I think what is likely to happen is that the Premier, like a lot of Labor members tonight, will take a bit of a haircut as the Dan slide from 2018 recedes. That was the high water mark. The tide's going to go out tonight. It'll go out in the Premier's own electorate. There's 14 candidates running, not unusual for a Premier's seat like a Melbourne Cup field, including a Kim Jong-un impersonator. Why not? Why not? Everyone else is running. Why not? But my guess is that the Premier will be returned there with a bit of a haircut. Ian Cook will give him a bit of a scare, but if Ian Cook wins that seat, I will eat his chef's hat.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Steve Bracks, Jeff Kennett and Chanel Vella are all with us at the moment. Now, over to you, Jeff. For the Coalition to win, they have to win 18 seats, another 18 seats. Where are they going to come from?
Well, within Victoria, hopefully. But we'll take them outside as well if we have to.
Outside?
But it's a big mountain to climb. But to be quite honest, you really don't know. We sit here, people have gone and voted, we've watched the opinion polls. Opinion polls more often have been right than wrong, but there have been the occasion when they have been wrong. So Time will tell. And that's why I say I'm not predicting. And listening to the comments about Mulgrave, you've got to understand with Ian Cook, it is the only seat in Victoria where there's been any emotion. The rest has been fairly flat. He had 300 people out there today from around the state, mainly women, who are volunteering their time. He's been given money from right around the state and interstate to fund his campaign. So you may be right, you may be wrong. I don't know, but time will tell.
It's so much harder for the independents, and if you're not in a major party, to fund your election.
But if you've got a draw card, and he does, the slug gate, right? It really is. Emotion. And he's got emotion. For instance, there's a lot of Vietnamese who live in Mulgrave running small businesses. And in speaking to some of them, they are genuinely worried that that might happen to them. And they left a country, a communist country up north. They came here for security. They don't like the controls that are in place. They see what's happened to Mr Cook and they're worried. So they will be overwhelmingly voting against the Premier. Not for the Liberals necessarily, but for Ian Cook.
Steve, how hard will the pandemic hit Daniel Andrews in particular? He argues, of course, that if it wasn't for the lockdowns, our economy would be in much worse shape.
Well, it's intriguing that the pandemic hasn't really featured in the campaign.
No.
It also hasn't figured in any analysis of what are the concerns of voters. You know, we've seen cost of living, health, integrity, but it hasn't figured. But I suspect it's in the background. It's it's already embedded. People have already made up their mind, and that's probably why we're so polarised, if you like. You know, you see the Premier, his ratings are about 50-50. But the passion of the 50 that love him and the passion of the 50 that dislike him are in equal measure, and that's probably because of the pandemic and what we've been through. But I suspect it's already been factored in.
Okay. I think, can I just on that? I think in rural Victoria, the pandemic is very, very much to the fore of people because up there they didn't have much COVID, etc., and they were locked down and they're very, very upset. They haven't forgotten. In the city, I think it's slightly different. There are other issues at play now. On
that, though, I think with COVID, people have to think, do I think the other side would have done it better? Yep. And that's also a question that they're
I think
asking
people have
themselves.
analysed it pretty well. And look, the regions, I don't think it's a big issue in the regions, actually.
Not in the regional cities, but in rural Victoria. Yes. If you make the
where they were locked down.
Yes, I think rural Victoria is different from regional, and regional I think is going to do a different result tonight than rural. But of course, most of the seats are held by the coalition in rural Victoria anyway.
Yep, thank you very much. Well, it's a nervous time for the two men vying to lead our state for the next 4 years. We'll have the latest on how both leaders are preparing to watch the results come in next on 7 News.
Voter anger erupts at polling booths as Victoria decides. Daniel Andrews is tipped to hold on to power, with Matthew Guy making a late pitch to voters. Also, a Werribee townhouse fire turns deadly. The hunt for a killer hit-run driver in Melbourne's southeast. Exclusive details on a wild crime spree in the north. Bondi Beach bears all, and new baby joy at Melbourne Zoo. 7's extensive election coverage continues next.
There might be someone out there casting their final vote in this election before the polls close at 6, but right now Matthew Guy and Daniel Andrews are about to learn their fate. Paul Dowsley is at Liberal Party headquarters roaming around. And Paul, how's Mr Guy spending the next couple of hours?
Mitch, he will be with his campaign team at their headquarters in town watching the count. Then he will make his way here to Doncaster, where at the moment we have some of the local lawn bowls players commiserating a loss. Whether Matthew Guy will be doing the same, we'll find out over the next couple of hours. He was actually in 8 different electorates this morning. Then he spent a couple of hours at home with his wife Renee and their 3 kids. This afternoon. Now, as I say, he's in town in their office there in Spring Street, watching the count over the next few hours. At some point, he will make that decision to get in the car, come down the Eastern Freeway here to Doncaster. We're right in the middle of his electorate. He lives only about 10 minutes away in Templestowe. He will then head onto the stage, and what he will say, Well, we'll have to wait and see how the count turns out. It has been a windy day this afternoon. There's a windsock here at the Bowls Club. Whether they're the winds of change, we'll wait and see.
That's where he's landing.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul Dowsley, talking about the winds of change. And Blake Johnson, Daniel Andrews, is expected to watch the results come in with his family.
Pete, it's been a very private approach to the last few days of the election for Daniel Andrews. No official public appearances today. He started out doing the rounds on Breakfast TV, then he popped down to Glen Huntly to meet the workers on a level crossing removal project, and finally he was in Richmond at the Volunteers Phone Centre where they're calling voters today, making their final pitch ahead of the results in the election. This afternoon we're told that the Premier spent the day with his family, and later tonight he will be here in Mulgrave. This is Labor headquarters for election night. Not a lot going on at the moment, mostly news crews and function staff preparing for the evening, but from about 6:30 onwards you can expect this room to be filled with hundreds of people, including outgoing Education Minister James Merlino. Will it be a political celebration or a political funeral? It's up to the vote counters now to tell us.
OK, Blake Johnson, thank you very much indeed. Jeff Kennett, Steve Bracks and Chanel Vella are here. The news is coming up at 6 with Mike and Beck, and then we'll be back with full analysis. Your final thoughts as we go. I did want to mention the Frankston train line seats of Bentley, Mordialloc, Carrum and Frankston. They were won handsomely by Labor last time. They're not going to fall back into coalition hands, are they?
Again, you're presuming. But
right.
Can I say that whole set of seats has gone our way one election, gone Labor's the next. So time will tell.
Steve, do you think that might happen?
Well, those seats were instrumental in the Liberal win in 210, of course, and most of those seats fell. Daniel Andrews got most of them back in 214 and they've held ever since. They're on pretty big margins. There will be some swings against Labor in those seats, but I can't see the Liberals making inroads into those seats.
The level crossing removals have been a big issue down there as to what they've put in. And
that's happened, and that's a big plus for Daniel Andrews.
Yeah. Now, these are live shots coming in right now of people still lining up to vote at 3 minutes to 6.
Oh, they might miss out, actually.
This is at Docklands, so they may run the risk of missing out with the doors closing. But that is a big queue, Jeff.
That is a huge queue. Can we get an extension of time for them, please? Steve, what seat is that? That'll be...
Docklands in Melbourne, of course.
Melbourne, yes.
Part of Melbourne, which is going to the Greens, or held by the Greens.
What do you think will happen in Melbourne?
I think close it.
It's been held by the Greens for some time, and I can't see that changing.
They can't keep the doors open for them to vote, can they? They have to close it.
Over time, that's a seat. There's a lot of increasing wealth with all those units, etc., going down there. So over time, I mean, the whole fabric of Victoria is changing.
It's all changing.
And it's going to accelerate. It's not going to get slower.
No, this is a fascinating view of what's going on out there at the moment. We are coming up to 6 o'clock, and right now VEC officials at polling booths across the state are preparing to open the ballot boxes and start the count. And we'll be back with our election team throughout the hours ahead, bringing you every key moment live with our panel of guests and others as well. The race to 45 is on, and 7 News at 6 starts now.
Tonight, Daniel Andrews tipped to hold on to power as Matthew Guy makes a last-ditch pitch to voters. Anger erupts at polling booths as Victoria decides. Special live election coverage is coming up. Also tonight, 2 men in their 20s killed in a Werribee townhouse fire tragedy. The hunt for a killer BMW